Welcome to our webinar. I'm so excited for you to join me. I know you're busy and we want to get straight to the good stuff, but happy 2017. I think everyone has a lot of maybe New Year's resolutions and goals, and certainly one of the things that's on my list is to be able to bring you more great people that have tips and tricks to make your story resonate with your community, reach more people. And because social media is so visual, getting great tips on taking photographs, whether it be with a nice camera or even with an iPhone or even an iPad, you can take really great pictures, but there's just a few tips and tricks. And very excited that both Christina and Megan will be joining us today to share their knowledge, their expertise, their professional background is in taking pictures. And so very excited for them to share with you today. So we are going to be providing a recording of this presentation. So if you don't have to take notes throughout it all. I know I will be, but you don't have to feel like you got to write everything down, because a recording of this presentation will be coming to you early this afternoon that you'll be able to listen to and even pass on to other people. I think if you're telling your story through social media and you're getting pictures from your staff members, this might be a video that you want to share with them, because it's going to give them some great tips and tricks on how to take better pictures. Really, our goal is, we're going to cover a lot, but the real goal is 1 to 2 ideas that are going to help you tell better stories through photos for your school district. So very important. If you're on Twitter, you can follow me at Andrea Gribble and also use the hashtag Social School for EDU. You can let them know, maybe even take a selfie of you tuning into this live webinar. That would be awesome. But you can certainly tweet things out, and we'll be sharing Megan and Christina's Twitter handle too. It'd be great for you to shout them some love for all of the great tips that you're going to be getting today. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction. Many of you know me, but I'll just explain a little bit about me and my company, and then we'll get right into some great examples, tips, tricks from Megan and Christina. Then I'll share a little bit on a spring event that's coming to the Minnesota and Wisconsin markets, and then we'll break out into Q&A. If you have questions, though, throughout the presentation, feel free to put those in the chat box, and we'll try to get to them as we go even. I know that sometimes things pop up and you might not remember them. Otherwise, write them down and we can get to those at the end. So this is me. I am Andrea Gribble, and I am the founder of hashtag Social School for EDU. I got a chance to work with my daughter's district, helping them launch social media. I found out other schools needed help, and so now this is my full-time thing, and I couldn't be more thankful. I have written a children's book. I'm a mom. I've got 2 daughters and 4 stepsons, all in the public education system, and so very committed to telling school stories and connecting parents with all the great things happening in the schools. Our team has shared over 20,000 social media posts for over 24 school districts, and we've actually trained over 500 school districts now and schools. So we love doing what we do. And just as a complete honesty for me, your host, and why I'm not hosting this webinar is, this is a picture I took, I think it was 2 years ago. I have a really nice camera, and this was a Valentine's Day dance. And these are the kind of pictures I take with that nice camera. And so just, being completely transparent here, I need these tips, and I'm so excited to learn. And in a few weeks, when there's the next Valentine's Day dance, I'm going to take much better pictures. And I'll make sure to also share those with you guys so I can see, we can see if they actually work on somebody like me. The mission of our company, hashtag Social School for EDU, is to celebrate students and connect communities through social media. We really love helping schools create awesome social media. And it needs to be awesome to be able to stand out. And so very, very committed to that. We offer a lot of free support. We have a weekly blog. We have this monthly webinar, free webinar. And you can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter where I try to share a lot of awesome things that schools are doing. Just so you know, I do a feature my school. I try to do it at least once a month. You're actually going to see more features this coming year. If you have a great story, go to featuremyschool.com. You can actually submit your story, your school, and you may be featured on one of my weekly blogs. So that's exciting. Also, my newsletter that comes to your inbox now every Tuesday morning, that's got like an app of the week, just some challenges for you and your school district to participate in. There's just a lot of content that you can stay updated. So it's just one newsletter that I would recommend that you check out. Take 5 minutes, read through it each week, and hopefully that will help you. So that's free support, but I do have a business too. And so we do social media management, website management, training, and speaking, and it's all based on schools. We actually serve right now 25 school districts in 3 different states with social media management, and I would not be able to do that all on my own. So this is a picture of my team, many stay-at-home moms actually that help me manage. And I'm going to reach out to you guys. If you know someone that would love some part-time income working right from their house, they love social media, reach out to me, give them, my Twitter handle or check out my website, send them my way. That's how I find great people, and we are going to be growing big time in 2017. So I would love to bring on more great people onto our team. Social media management, we manage Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Basically through the internet, we can grab great content from your school, and we can help share all the great things out on social media. Website management sometimes is overwhelming for schools. They can't keep things up to date. So again, information, photos are sent to us, and then we're able to keep that current. We do a lot of training, webinar-based training like this, in-house workshops, regional workshops, even coaching. We do some coaching for districts to really give you the help you need to take your social media kind of to the next level, hands-on, just based on you. So if, these group trainings are great, but if you feel like your team needs a little bit more, definitely check out our coaching program. And then speaking, I love to go to schools and talk about social media, technology balance, getting your parents into what's going on with social media, and then also, staff, and getting them excited and know the reasons why we're using social media to tell their story. So very important. So now let's get to the content, and I'm going to get it to the experts here. But first of all, introduce you to Christina Beam. Christina's been the school communicator for the Baraboo School District in southwestern Wisconsin for the past year. So she's only been there a year. She's made a huge, dramatic, impact on that school district. Prior to that, she worked for 5 years in university relations for the University of Wisconsin and was a newspaper reporter and photographer for Capital newspapers in the Madison area. She also runs a successful photography business in Baraboo since 2008, and she focuses on high school seniors. And she specializes in using visual storytelling to engage the school district community and its stakeholders. So very excited for you to hear from Christina. And you'll also be hearing from Megan Sheridan. You can follow her at by Megan Sheridan on Twitter. She's at Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. She is new to school communications and has previously worked in advertising and journalism as an editor, writer, and photographer. She, similar kind of to Christina, you'll see that a trend in that. I see some of the greatest school communicators have that background. Megan is a 2009 graduate of UW Oshkosh, And her first major photographic work was for the New York Times back in 2007. So we've got some big players here, and I am going to now pass the baton over to Megan. She will share her screen, and I will introduce you to both Megan and Christina.
All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Megan Sheridan. I'm the Director of Communications and Community Outreach for the School District of Menominee Falls. As Andrea said earlier, I kind of have a varied background. I worked in advertising for a hot minute down in Madison, working for a social media company, marketing company that primarily focused on luxury brands, which is quite different from what I do now and quite different from what I did at newspapers. I worked at the Columbus Journal in Columbus, Wisconsin for about a year. Before that, I was a photographer and writer for the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen, which is in the same network as Christina's old paper. And before that, I worked at the Oshkosh Northwestern. So very excited to have everybody here and share these ideas. Christina, do you have anything you want to add about your background?
Yeah, hello. No, Andrea's introduction was wonderful. Like she said, I'm from the Baraboo School District. We lived in this community for 13 years, so I know it pretty well, but only worked for the school district for about a year. But in my time with the Baraboo News Republic, I was an education reporter, so sort of got to see the other side of school storytelling. But we've learned, recently that with staffing cuts at the newspaper, we're not getting the quality or quantity of coverage that we'd like from the school district, or for the school district rather. So we've really been working on sort of taking on the role of being our own storyteller, and I think that the visual element of that has been really important for us. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
And I don't have my webcam on, but I am definitely nodding. We're seeing a lot of that in our district too, where there's less of a focus on education reporting from our weekly newspapers. Those weekly newspapers are covering larger and larger areas, so there's less and less time to focus on us as a district, and being able to have strong visual communication really gets that point across. I think, and I've heard the number someplace, probably what was it, 70% of the communication we do is visual, so being able to communicate clearly and concisely with quality images really does make a difference. So if I get to click through here. There we go. So today what we'll cover, just overarching, is how do we show the story of your district? What makes a photo good? What device should I be using for what I'm doing? How to better work with your students in your district? What to do when you're overwhelmed with the photo assignments? And what to do once you have all these photos to work with. So first things first, I like to call this the pillars of the infinite photo strength, but all school districts have a strategic plan, and most communication departments have their own strategic plan as well. And it's really important to utilize that strategic plan as planning out what photos you need from your district. This is also a really great way to reinforce what's important for you to take photos of. Likely, if you're in a one-person communication staff like myself, you're the one person with the really nice camera, so you get tons of photo requests. And like most school PR folks, you can't have 90% of your job being photos. So it's always great to take your strategic plan and say, okay, these events, these activities, these are what's important for driving our strategic communication. So actually, we'll go back. So for me in Menominee Falls, what I really focus on in getting those photos for our marketing pieces and social media is building leaders, college and career ready, individualized learning, continuous improvement, and inspiring pride in our community. Christine, did you want to talk about yours a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we have 4 pillars to our strategic plan: personalized learning, maximizing potential of learners and educators, community partnerships, and modernized community campus. And I agree completely with Megan that those are both a framework for me as I'm using my images to tell the story of what's happening in our district, but it's also, they also function as sort of guideposts for what is a good use of my time as a one-person communications team.
So we can go through our list of what's in our strategic communication plan, but being able to translate that strategic plan to what that looks like as a photo, that's kind of the tough part for a lot of folks. So when we say, what does it look like in a photo to build your leaders, that kind of stuff. So Christine and I both pulled some examples of what those look like for us, and we can go through those. I think do these zoom in? There we go. Okay. So these are some of my photos from Menominee Falls. In the top left, that's one of our fan boot camps. So when we talk about building leaders, these kids are taking time out of their summer to learn how to be respectful during games, how to do cheers that aren't, inappropriate, because that does happen sometimes at high schools. So, these kids are learning how to be better leaders, not necessarily in the game, but on the side of the court, too. In the top right, we have one of our 4Kers. He's super cute. And that kind of, feeds back into that, individualized learning, that one-to-one. A lot of districts are going one-to-one. We're not quite there yet, but we are from about middle school up, one-to-one communication. So lower left for us is, that's one of my favorite little cutie cutes. That's Noah. He's working on his data binder. One of the things we do in our district as part of continuous improvement is have our students track their data and their progress in their learning. So that's him working on his data binder. And then the bottom right, you can see one of our Valley View students, I think this is kindergarten or first grade, working on what we use the PDSA cycle, so plan, do, study, act. So in here they're working on their math and planning out what they're going to learn and how they're going to do it. So.
All right, for ours, in the upper left-hand corner, that is, I had to look at how it's phrased here, maximizing potentials of learners and maximizing potential of learners and educators. Those are some of our high school seniors. We have a new program this year. This one actually works for two of our strategic plan pillars because it's also a community partnership where students work with our local ambulance service and to become EMT certified by the time they graduate. So it's really a great service to our community, but it's also allowing those kids with, an interest in medicine or in emergency services to have that opportunity while they're still in our school district. The upper right-hand corner, I'm actually pretty proud of this picture, strangely, but that's a photo from our one-to-one Chromebook rollout from the second day of school this year. It's pretty challenging to get an engaging photo of kids on laptops, but our tech director really wanted a few for himself because he was pretty proud of this effort. So it's the first day, and so even though all of them have seen laptops many times before, and the Chromebook is not the fanciest of them all, they were pretty excited to have that opportunity, and they also thought it was a little funny that I was taking photos of them. So getting that good expression of the three of them working together on a computer really shows, that personalized learning initiative. Bottom left-hand corner is a little bit of a curmudgeonly neighbor to our kindergarten center, and he had come to the district with a little bit of a complaint about the yard in the school that faced his front porch was not that beautiful. But instead of just complaining, he came up with the idea to build some raised beds and do a community garden on that side of the school, and he worked with our principal and our teachers there, and came over and actually got his hands in the dirt with the kindergartners. So that worked really great as a community partnership story. And then the bottom right-hand corner is in our STEM room at the middle school, where one of our middle schoolers was learning about drones. So that's for our modernized community campus. It's a relatively new addition to the school and really shows, the broader community, the dance things that are happening in our classrooms.
Okay, so we can can look at those photos and be like, oh, those are great photos. But, you know, for somebody like myself, I've been doing this for 10 years, and so has Christina. So a lot of what makes a good photo to tell a story is kind of inherent to us. So we want to give you 4 pretty significant tips of saying, like, do this, don't do that. And those things will make a huge difference in your photos, whether you're taking them with a DSLR or taking them with a smartphone. So, Christine, do you want to go through the rule of thirds?
Sure. The rule of thirds is a, principle or an idea that's existed in art for centuries. So you can see some examples there. The Last Supper and Salvador Dali. Then a few of my photos and Megan's photos too. But it's the idea that the human eye finds an image interesting if the most important things are happening at the intersection of those lines. So if you take a photo of any sort of ratio and divide it into thirds, horizontally and vertically, then the most interesting aspects of the photo should be happening either along the intersection of the lines or along the line itself. And it just functions as a way that as you're looking at it as a viewer, your eye is sort of moving around the image and taking it all in. If it's a simple composition where the subject is always right in the middle, it just doesn't provide as much interest to us as a viewer. So this is a picture of some of our ELL kiddos on a tire swing, and I just waited until they were, sort of more in the bottom left quadrant of the image instead of right in the middle. And it just gives it a sense of movement. And when you have that blank space in the upper right-hand corner, you can sort of imagine the tire swing moving up in that direction, and it gives it a little bit of, movement and visual space. The photo from our homecoming game this year. It's a really misty, foggy night, and just composed it so that all of the football players were along that 1/3 line along the bottom, and then just sort of setting the scene, including the light up toward the upper right-hand intersection. And it's just a little bit more interesting than if I had put them right in the middle and had a bunch of the sort of asphalt track filling up the bottom of the frame.
So the one thing we will want to, if you have a DSLR, most DSLRs have the rule of thirds kind of built into the photo grid. But the one thing that I did want to show you guys is how to get to your rule of thirds on your iPhone. I use an iPhone, so I'm sorry I don't have Android instructions. I would assume there's probably something in Android that allows you to do the same. But when we had presented this at WISPRA, and when we were putting together the presentation, I was thinking, oh man, rule of thirds is hard to envision for somebody that's a newbie. So I looked up how to get the rule of thirds on your iPhone, and I turned it on my phone, and even myself, as somebody that's been doing this for a while, having the grid there was so much more helpful, because I was like, I actually thought through the steps of what makes this photo better and aligning my subject to that grid. So that's how you turn on the rule of thirds on your iPhone. And I would assume also on your iPad it should work that way as well too. So one other thing that is really important when framing your photo is perspective. So we'll go through a little bit of that angle work. These are, aside from the bottom left, all of these are Christina's photos, so they're super awesome. I'm going to let her talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, so most people, when they're just getting started with photography, sort of just stand where they are and take the photo. And the idea of perspective is to, sort of maximize expression, and really, especially when working with children, to get on their level. So this is a photo from our summer school class last year where it was a STEM class, and these little kiddos, most of them are kindergarten and first graders, so they're tiny, and I'm quite tall. We're building Lego vehicles and racing them. What I really wanted to show was that sort of pride of creation with that little guy in the blue Star Wars shirt, and also the sort of excitement and engagement of the other kiddos who are watching him. And even the look on the teacher's face is kind of funny in that one. But to get their faces, I really had to get down on their level. And for this particular shot, I was actually laying on my stomach on the floor, and sort of making a tripod out of my elbows and holding the camera that way. And this one also from our summer school class, a nature class, and of course little kids, especially little boys, love digging in the dirt, so they were digging for earthworms. I really loved, how their arms and legs were sort of folded in and how they were so close together and so focused and engaged on what they were learning. But to get this shot, I again had to get down on their level. They were not even interested in the fact that I was there. They weren't cheesing for me or anything, but they, I really wanted to show their face, and show even the texture of the grass. So I had to get down. I think I was sitting in the mud on this one. So just as comparison, this is a photo that I think a teacher had submitted to my predecessor last year. So we're always happy to get teacher submissions, but I feel like this was sort of a lost opportunity because here we have these sort of SFA, future farmer, high school tough guys in their muddy boots and their ripped jeans reading Bernstein Bears to little kindergartners, and it's an adorable scene, but because it was shot from above, you can't see the kindergartners' expressions at all. You can't really see the guys because they have hats on, and if this would have been shot from the side so that you could see both the high school kids' faces and the kindergartners' faces, and from below so that you are on their level, it would have been a much stronger photo and told a better story about what was happening here. This is from the Read Across America event at one of our schools last year. Just a really simple example of changing perspectives. Again, I'm 5'11", so if I would have stood, I would have gotten more of the top of that hat and the top of the girl's head. And all I did was sort of squat down a little bit so that it was at desk level, so I could shoot across and really again get their faces. And this uses a little bit of rule of thirds too, even though together they're sort of in the middle. Each one of them, if you imagine that grid, is along one of those lines.
And the other thing, and I pointed this out at our last presentation, the other thing that I think is really great about this photo, and this is something you'll also pay more attention to as you become more skilled, is that this photo has these interesting spots of red color that match the hat, that match the shirt, that match the stuff on the shelves, that matches the elementary school water bottle. So intentional or unintentional, those red pieces really make this photo pop out. So as you become more skilled in photo taking, you'll start recognizing those things too, where you have those colors that match up together and create this really great contrast. Okay, so these are all of my photos. So I'm going to talk about lighting a little bit. And lighting doesn't have to be complicated. When I first started out, and the camera that I use now has a speed light, which is a detachable flash. And I'm still not an expert at it by any means, but when I first started, using any flash at all was like, either you used the flash and you ended up with kind of crappy lighting, or you stayed as far away as possible from using a flash because you knew natural lighting was better, but then you didn't have the skills for both. But we'll go through just natural lighting, how to work with that. And because that's what's most accessible to you. Not everybody has a good flash on their camera, and you don't necessarily always need it either. So these are two photos from the same room, literally 5 minutes apart from each other. So in the photo on the left, one of our board members is greeting one of our SPLA members. And in taking this photo, the light was coming from behind me. There was big, huge windows. So Kylie's face is very well lit. There's good contrast there. And if you look at the right, this is this is a mother of one of our students who just had gotten, he got accepted into the scholarship business program for UW-Madison, where if he completes X amount of coursework and stuff, he gets a free ride to Madison. So understandably, Mom was very excited. But you can see here, that window that I was standing in front of the last time is now behind this mom. And although we can see her face all right, a lot of the other stuff around her is blown out. So you can see that there's kind of that haze over her hair. The other board members aren't, they're a little overexposed. So you can see the difference between standing one way and standing another. General rule of thumb, try to not have a window behind your subject. That's where you're really going to run into trouble if there's any one takeaway. So like when you're doing big group photos, I always make sure they're not standing in front of a window when I take it. So here's an outdoor location when it comes to lighting. So this was taken in the afternoon. So, there's a thing that people call the golden hour, which is like as the sun's setting, you get this kind of nice diffuse lighting. But sometimes that lighting can also be a little harsh, and that can be an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. So if we look at the photo on the left, you can see the light is kind of almost a little bit coming from behind him and upwards. And because of that, I can't see the detail on the side of his face that I'm shooting from. It's not necessarily a bad photo, but it's not as detailed as I would like it. And the other thing that I feel is kind of distracting with it is you look on the far right of that photo, there's another runner behind him who's very blown out because he has way more light hitting him. And that can be a little distracting from the subject that I want people to see. So on the right, then you have, it's that same corner of the track, but I'm just standing on the other side now. So now you can really get a good look at this runner's face and the activity and that sort of thing. So angles are super, super important when it comes to lighting. You don't necessarily always need to have a flash. You just need to make sure you're standing in the right spot because literally 5 feet can make the difference. So we're also going to go talk about framing a little bit. And framing is kind of combining a little bit of rule of thirds, a little bit of lighting, but it's finding a good frame within your setting that makes the photo more dynamic. And I'll have Christina talk about her photos first.
Sure. So another concept in photography is called a frame within a frame. So if you imagine that the border of the photo is one frame, then if you use an element in the environment where you're taking the photo to function as a second frame, then it sort of draws the viewer to your subject. So this is in a class where they were using recycled materials to create a marble run. And so I shot through the frame that she had built for her marble run to get her expression. So she has a really great expression in this photo anyway. She's really focused and, sort of thoughtful about what she's doing, which we love to see in our classrooms. And then that frame within a frame just sort of draws you into that moment even more. The next one is actually, full disclosure, my first grade daughter with one of our wonderful retired teachers and community members, and she's a farmer, and every year she hosts a farm field trip for all the kindergartners. And so this is her, helping my daughter feed carrots to the horse. When we're talking about composition, we really want to focus on what the story is and what the moment is. So for this photo, what I really wanted to capture was this moment with my daughter looking excited and a little anxious maybe and full of wonder. I don't need the barn in the background or any of the other kids. I don't even need her feet in this photo or the full body of the teacher or all of the horse. I really just want to focus in on this moment. And the frame within a frame is obviously I shot her sort of through the fence there.
And that's another good point that you touched on that we didn't really necessarily put into the presentation, but don't be afraid to get close, especially if you're using your smartphone or an iPad. The zoom on there is not that great. And a lot of times we want to get as wide of an angle as possible in thinking that having tons of stuff in the photo will tell the whole story. And that's not necessarily the case, because the thing that parents want to see, the thing that potential new parents want to see, is they want to see a child that's really happy and engaged and excited. So getting in and getting close and getting that emotional reaction, that actually, I think, serves you better in a lot of cases when it comes to telling your district story. So these are two of my photos when we talk about framing. Your frame within a frame doesn't necessarily have to be another inanimate object. So this is one of our 4K students. My favorite time of year is the first day of 4K, and in our district, 4K starts on a different day than the rest of the kids, so it's one full day that I can focus on just 4K, and it's so much fun because these kids some of them are a little terrified, but most of them are really excited. So this is during parent drop-off. So the person on the left is one of our educational assistants. I think maybe it might have been a 4K teacher, and then mom on the right. So you can see how excited he is. So he has, his new teacher on one side and his mom on the other. And because and this is another thing about the color again, mom's wearing a black shirt, the EA's wearing, this black striped shirt. It frames him in really nicely, so you can really focus on how excited he is, And, when we talk about this photo in terms of rule of thirds, you can kind of see if you do the vertical lines, they kind of cut where those arms are a little bit. So that frames him in nicely too, even though he really is, in terms of rule of thirds, front and center. So one of the other things I always have a hard time with is, you always get invited to take photos at band concerts. And, you're not supposed to move around too much because it's distracting and you're noisy and all that kind of stuff. And you can only take so many photos of, like, the band show with people sitting and playing instruments. It's not exactly a dynamic photo. So one of the things that I always try to do when I go to these things is try and take photos of the kids that aren't the first chairs, those kids right on the end, because those are easy. But really focus on the other kids that are in the band or orchestra, because those kids that aren't first chairs, those are hardworking kids too. So what I ended up doing with this photo is shooting through the arm and violin of one of the first chair players to get this girl playing. So it makes the photo a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dynamic, and you also get this look of focus on her face that's just really intense, so you can see how hard she's working. So working with kids, sometimes this is easy, sometimes it's tough, but we'll go through kind of like different age groups and, how to work with them, because 4Kers are very different from high schoolers, and we'll talk through that a little bit.
All right. If you want to pull in on that first photo, Megan, briefly. So the challenge with going into classrooms is that most parents really want at home, or they think they want, that cheesy, smiley photo from their kids. And so kids are being taught at home, look at me, stop what you're doing, say cheese. And then we have to sort of help them relax and unlearn that if we want authentic photos in the classroom. So this is a friend of mine's beautiful daughters, and she takes a ton of photos of her kids and shares them on Facebook. But almost all of them have this sort of expression. So you can see, their mouths are smiling, but their eyes are not in on it because they probably are told, multiple times a day, look at me and smile. So these are the kiddos that are then going to school, and they see you put the camera up to your face, and they turn to you and give you this expression. So we have to sort of work through that and past that. The next one is at like a field day event at the kindergarten center. Tons of kids, take a picture of me, let me see the picture. Here, I'll smile for you, I'll be cheesy. So you have to, like I said, keep shooting through that and past that. So this little gal was, playing with a hula hoop and just having a blast, and I just stood there and was sort of present in the moment, and she was laughing on her own and waited just for her to turn toward me while she was in the middle of that expression. And that's a much more even though you can't see her eyes in this picture because of her fabulous shapes, you can still feel that it's a much more authentic smile than if I had just told her to look at me and smile. This one was part of a story that I did about a new autism program that we're doing in our school district. Just an aside, for me, like personally, a mission has been equity in terms of how we show our kids in our school district. So I do really work hard to showcase our children of color and also our children with disabilities and really tell the story of how we're serving them and how we value them as well. So this is, like I said, a little kiddo on the autism spectrum in the special program, and they had fundraised to bring these kids to the indoor pool and do swimming lessons because drowning is a major cause of concern for families of kids with autism. So he was in the sort of handicap ramp, just splashing and having fun, and I waited for that moment where he's really authentically engaged in what he's doing. Fake, authentic smile.
I love this.
Yeah, this is my favorite.
This is one of my favorite photos from last year. So, not every great photo needs to be joyful or of a big smile either. And I feel that way of pictures that I take of my own kids. That, you know, children are little human beings just like us, and they have a full range of expression and emotion and experiences that aren't all smiley and happy. But this one was at the Read Across America event, and the teacher made green eggs and ham. And I could see this little guy, like, when the plate was put in front of him, I was like, I'm going to wait for that moment. So got down on his level, was crouching on the floor so I could really, you know, capture his face. Waited for that first bite to go in his mouth, and then he turned and looked at me just like, what is happening? Why did they do this to me? And it's just like such a great expression, and this one really resonated with our parents too, because they see their kiddos at home and have these experiences with them, and they want to know that their school district, you know, loves and appreciates their child no matter what mood they're in, and that we're on the same page with them in that regard.
And I'd also like to point out with this photo is there's a really good use of negative space. There's not a ton going on behind him. That table's nice and clean, the walkway's nice and clean. But if you notice with this photo again, too, Christina had a really great use of color. So you have the green eggs, you have the green shirt, you have the green chair, you have the green parts of the book that all kind of tie that in together, too. So it's a really great use of color and a really great use of negative space.
So this one was during a mini Pee-wee homecoming parade for school last year, and there were a lot of them where the kids would see me and sort of look at me and smile. And I, you know, share those photos as well, but this one I really liked because the way that she's biting her lower lip and not really looking right at me. I think she was looking at one of her teachers who was kind of cheering her on. So, you know, that sort of trepidation at being the center of attention, but also excitement and pride in your school district. It's just a little bit more of a full range of expression than just the classic smiling and cheesing for the camera.
So this is just a really good example of the difference between the cheese photo and actual interaction with, like, you know, what's going on there. So every year Riverside Elementary has their Race for Kids, where they actually go down to the baseball diamond next to the school and run around it, like run the bases. So last year they were able to, if you live in southeastern Wisconsin, you can actually rent the racing wieners, FYI. If you rent all of them, it's a little expensive, but you can rent just like one or two because the people that are inside the racing wiener costumes are like college interns. So as long as they know what they're doing, they'll send them out. So we got the racing. I think this is the hot dog, right? he came for Rally for Kids, and because they were there and because it was a fundraiser for school, we had a ton of moms there taking photos. And so you had a ton of these where it's like, oh, Mackenzie, go stand by the hot dog. And those are great photos for mom. Those are great photos for the scrapbook or the Christmas card. But for me as a photographer and a communicator, it's okay. It shows something happened, but it doesn't really show like what the kids did with them. So the photo on the right is some of these kids actually interacting with the racing hot dog. If you look in the far back of the photo, there's a little girl with braids. Like, she is just not having it. Like, not every kid loves the racing sausages. But this shows, like, the curiosity that these kids have for something like this. And there's a whole series of photos for this event where the racing sausages are playing kickball with the kids. So it's not just standing and posing for a photo. It's that interaction that I think better tells a story for what's going on at your schools day to day.
Yeah, and I really like the composition in that one too. Megan, didn't include the hat and the feet and every part of. You only need a sort of sliver to get an idea that the hot dog is there, but then you can really see. I like how all three kids are looking in a different spot. So the kiddo on the right is looking up into the hot dog space. The kiddo on the left is trying to peek into the hole where the actual human being is. The one in the middle is checking out his sneakers, and it's really, because it's cropped so tightly, you can really get a look at their expressions.
So working with older kids, I would say in both of our experiences, is quite different than working with elementary school kids. Because, young kids have that impulse to like freeze and smile and cheese. High school kids, and I think this is something they must learn in middle school, it's that like embarrassing hormone thing that kicks in. Like, kids just, like, high school kids are just like, oh God, someone's taking a photo, like, just please don't, nope, you're not taking my photo. So when it comes to high school kids, being patient with them is super important, because that first, like, couple of minutes of them being, oh God, hide from the camera, eventually wears off. Like, short attention spans are for real, guys, because they will stop paying attention to you and just go back to whatever they were doing. So the more you spend time, like, it takes a little bit more time, like, at an event to get the good photos with high school kids, because a lot of times they'll try and avoid the camera as much as possible. And for me in my district, I found that if I share, not so much on Facebook, but if I share our high school kid photos on Instagram, they love it. They really do. Like, that's where your kids are at right now, is Snapchat and the gram, if you will. So sharing that kind of stuff there, it does really get good feedback from those students. And these photos here are Christina, so I'll let her go through some of them.
Yeah, I have a tiny bit of advantage because I know a lot of high school students through my senior photography business, and they just know me or know of me, so I don't feel like I get as much pushback maybe, but I do love sort of capturing those moments with older students too, and parents love them as well. This one is from, I just stumbled upon one of our English teachers taking his AP class to the park across the high school after finals, but before school year was done. And he had them all sit, find some place in the park to be by themselves and write a letter to somebody who had helped them get to where they are today. So they were really focused and engaged on what they were doing, and it was also a really meaningful story that I think, goes into going back to our strategic plan, talks about personalized learning and talks about how much our educators really care about our students. So that's what this guy was doing, and you use rule of thirds, sort of put him at the bottom of the frame. These are some of our National Honor Society kids. Oh, sorry, you can go ahead. And they were doing some volunteer work at the community gardens. They look really posed, but they were just raking mulch, and so they were waiting for the crew of kids to come back with the wheelbarrows. And I like how they're all sort of looking in different directions and just joyful in service, which I think is a good a good story as well, that we have great kids in our school district who care about our community. I didn't ask them to look at me, you know. They just sort of are used to me and ignore me. And this is our homecoming queen at the end of the homecoming parade. Had lots of photos of her from that day, you know, marching across the gym floor in her homecoming dress with her crown. You can see her crown a little bit there, or like waving from the convertible in the parade. But to me, like, this is the best photo of her from that day because she's so real. And the parade was over, it was raining, and she and her friends were just dancing in the rain to the school marching band playing our school song, and she was just having a blast. And so that's my favorite photo of her from that day, because it's much more authentic than the sort of queen's wave from the convertible.
I got a quick question from Justin. He asked, and maybe you can help Megan, how do you share the digital SLR photos on Instagram?
Well, I will typically, and I'll touch on this a little bit in a few minutes, but all of my photos that I take, I put into our Flickr account, and Flickr has a really great app that works very well. So I'll do all of my editing on a desktop with Photoshop. I'll load them into Flickr. I'll put them into albums. I'll tag them, all that kind of stuff. But when I want to share stuff on Instagram, I will go into my Flickr app on my smartphone and then pull the photo from Flickr onto my phone. I found that was the easiest way to have a photo that's high quality, work on a social app, because you're right, a lot of times it's tough to get a DSLR photo from the DSLR to your computer to your smartphone. So I found, for me, that was the easiest way to do it.
There's also an app that you can put on your computer that's called Grambler. It's Grambler, and then you can just upload a JPEG onto there and post it on Instagram from your computer instead of having to transfer the photo over to your phone. So I use that. I'm not very active on Instagram with my school account, but that's an app that I've used in the past.
Oh, that was worth the price of admission right there, right? Because we all are struggling with having to get, you know, to post on Instagram. Usually it's on your phone. So Grambler, Grambler. I'll make sure to put a link in the email that I send out to everybody. Awesome.
Okay. So one other thing we want to touch on with working with students is encouraging interaction. Because a lot of times, and Christina's really good at this, and I actually, when we were planning this presentation, and she was talking to me about this, I actually started using some of that in my own work. And it, one, does help me get a better story, but two, it does encourage activity. So as the photographer, you should absolutely be like asking questions, asking kids to like point things out to you, that kind of stuff. I did that recently. I was in a middle school class taking photos of kids making robotic cars, and so I said, you know, like, show me how you code this. So, you know, I have a student there that's, you know, pointing out like, this is where this goes, this is where that goes, and it made for an interesting photo as opposed to a kid just sitting at a computer. But I'll let Christina go through some of these photos.
Yeah, so there's a really famous 20th century French photographer, Henri Cartier-Bresson, and his sort of philosophy was to wait for what he called the decisive moment. And so I really take that to heart in school photography too, that there are a lot of sort of mundane things happening in our classrooms, just like in any, you know, workplace or any environment. But what you want to be ready for is that moment, you know, that really is decisive and tells the story. So this is, you know, our special ed class at one of our elementary schools went on a field trip to the bowling alley. And what I'm really waiting for is that moment of like, you know, excitement and pride and support coming from our educators toward every one of our students. So you can see the ball is going down the, what is it called? Is that the alley? I don't know.
The alley.
Not a blower. You know, he had just let go of the ball and got this really excited high five from his teacher. So that's the decisive moment. I could have gotten him actually throwing the ball, but that's not as interesting to me. I want to show that relationship with his educator. The this is the last day of 4K. This little darling is holding a tissue because she was crying because she was sad to leave school for the summer. And that in itself is a story to me. And of course, then her teacher starts crying too, posted this one on Facebook and just said, something to the effect of, you have a great school district when your kids are crying because they don't want to leave for summer vacation. So that waiting for that moment of mutual expression, they're mirroring each other's expression. They both feel sad about, losing each other, or like that relationship coming to a close. And that tells a story of your school district at large, too, because you waited for that moment. The next one, let's see. Yeah, at a fancy day at school where the kiddos were kind of dressed up and got to have a fancy, candlelight lunch at school. And these 3 guys were sort of sitting next to each other, and that was cute enough, especially the one with the big Hawaiian print bow tie on the right. But the one in the middle kind of put his arms around his friends, and then they started rocking. And then I could just feel the moment approaching. So if you're really observant and you wait, you'll get a sense of when it's about to happen. So then I could see, his friends sort of were getting goofy with him, and that made for the sort of decisive moment in the photo.
So here's a little bit more of what we talk about, that decisive moment. And we've both said this before, is the photo that you think is going to be a great photo, if you wait an extra 5-10 seconds, there might be an even better photo hiding there. So waiting for that moment is super, super important. And I'll let Christina go through some of these photos too. They kind of, I think, really capture the emotion of the event more so than your typical photo.
Sure, I'll be brief about these, I guess, but this is on the right, our teacher who works with EBD kids at the middle school received Teacher of the Year award. So I got photos of her, being surprised with it and standing up on the stage with all of her colleagues and being handed the plaque and all of those sort of traditional photos. But I knew that her mother was there, and so she was working her way through the crowd, seeing all of her friends and colleagues and family. But I knew the decisive moment would be when she first saw her mom after getting this award. And so just waited. And, even after they greeted each other, they hugged. So that was a good photo. But then when they pulled back from the hug, I could just sort of feel that energy. So if you're really in tune with things, you'll get a sense of it. And then when she put her hand up on her face, obviously that was the image that I wanted. This one is one of our graduates from last year who has a pretty severe disability, was the very first one to come, get her diploma and walk down from the stage. And I got her being handed the diploma. I got her walking down the stairs. But then when she turned and she saw her mom in the crowd and started running with that excitement toward her mom, then that was my decisive moment. And then again, just looking for chances for teachers and students to be mirroring each other's expressions. So this was in a little French class at summer school, being sort of silly and playing a language game. They were looking at each other and talking, and that was a good photo, but then sort of waiting for them to each be on the same page in terms of expression shows that connection between them. And then this was at float building, lots of photos of kids with paintbrushes and making signs and paper mache and all that fun stuff. But the girl on the far left there she was like, okay, guys, I'm going to put on whatever song. I don't remember the song because I'm not that cool. And she put it on, and they all, you could just feel the energy building. And so they were sort of singing along, and it was building up to the chorus, and then they all sort of scream singing along with it and jumping up and down. And just, like Megan said, just waiting 5 or 10 seconds after the photo that you think you wanted to get often produces a photo that really does tell the story or have that energy to it.
So one of the other things that I think for a lot of districts is something that, it garners a lot of community support, a lot of interest, is your sports. And I know for a lot of school communicators, sports photography can be a struggle. A lot of times most districts will have a pretty strong prep news coverage, so they don't have to worry about this too much. But I did prep sports as well as some college Badgers, Titans stuff for probably about 5 or 6 years. So I would say I'm decently well versed in sports photography. I could give an entire separate discussion on sports photography and how to get the best photos for each sport and all that kind of stuff. But that would take forever. So I just want to go through these really quickly. And we talk about the decisive moment. A lot of times when you just are new to taking sports photos, you try and take photos that are very wide, and it's like you're trying to catch the action, but really you want a combination of the anticipation of something as well as the action. So what you see in a lot of these photos is that almost their photo. So you have that, that very first touch of the football, that moment before you hit that volleyball serve, the moment before the basketball goes in, that moment before he hits that baseball. And that's, for me at least, what I would say is the decisive moment, is that anticipation. I think that's really important in sports photography. If there's any of you out there that are really interested in sports photography, need some advice, have some questions, find me on Twitter or shoot me an email. We don't have enough time to discuss it in depth today, but I'm always willing to help. So, and I'll go through these pretty quickly. As a single person in the communications department at my school, with 4,000 kids, we have a ton of stuff going on, and I can't be at everything all the time, always. So one of the things we developed in our district is a crew called Falls Creative. These are high school students. They're typically juniors and seniors that have their own transportation and maybe are interested in photography. So we purchased some lower-end DSLRs for them, and we'll send them to assignments that I can't necessarily get to, or don't necessarily fit into my communications plan, and they'll get paid $30 to $50 per assignment. And these kids come back with great photos. They always come back with sometimes maybe too many photos. I sent one kid to a scholarship auction, and I asked for 20 photos, and I got 300. And most of them are pretty darn good, so no complaints there. But Falls Creative has worked out really well for us in being able to cover that gap of not always having me at every event. The other thing I want to suggest to people is make contributing easy. So, if you can't be at every school all the time, always, find those people that are already in those schools that might have an interest in photography or social media or something like that, and really grow them into that ability. So at each of our schools, we have a webmaster that's paid a small stipend, and they control our school's social media. They help coordinate any photos, any events, that kind of stuff. And they all do a really great job at working with their staff in making contributing easy. So like at North Middle School, our webmaster says, hey, do you have a great photo from your classroom? Like, just text it to me, and I'll get it up. So people will either drop it on the server for her, email it to her, or text it to her. So she gave them a lot of avenues to contribute, and it's made a huge difference at the middle school. And this is, again, feeding into that. Make your leaders your cheerleaders. Public relations is not just my business or Christina's business. It's everybody's business. And I think at my school, at least, our principals are really starting to grow into that role and understand that. So when you put your school leaders in charge of leading that charge for promoting how proud you are of your school, that makes a huge difference too. So Riverside Elementary's principal set a goal for himself that he's going to tweet once a day, either from the school account or from his principal account, about like photos of what's going on there at that school at that day. So one of the other things is, I've got all these photos now. This is where I will talk about Flickr a little bit. If you need editing, is not necessarily, you don't need the high-end Photoshop. There's some great lower-end Adobe products like Elements that work really well.
I like to use Lightroom too. It's a good way to pull up a bunch of photos at once and cull, and you can get some really easy like presets, they call them, for Lightroom to do editing, or you can do batch editing. I find that really helpful and time saving. I use that for my business, and I use it at work as well. And it's like, I think $10 a month for a subscription so it's cloud based and it's updating all the time, and it's really worth it for me.
And the other thing, if you're primarily working with your smartphone to take photos, and for some reason the icon disappeared, I don't know where it went, but there's a great app called MuseCam that will help with photo taking and editing. Adobe Photoshop actually does have an app that works pretty well for editing on the fly as well. When it comes to storage, I cannot say enough about Flickr. Not only do you have a way to organize and store your photos, you can also have different levels of privacy to them. So you can make them completely public and downloadable for everybody. You can change the copyright settings. Like, all of my photos have a all rights reserved copyright. If you wanted to, you can make your photos public domain, so anybody could use them without a copyright. You can also make all of your photos private. You can only make them available to people that you've allowed to make available to them, or you can make them completely public. So there's lots of different levels of security about this. I know we had questions the last time around about, like, who do you let see your photos? For me in my district, all of these photos are publicly viewable and publicly downloadable. We have an opt-out system for families that are not comfortable with having photos taken of their kids, and there's very few in our district, but we have yet to run into any problems with copyright or any problems with photos being public. I think most parents at this point are pretty comfortable with photos being taken of their kids, and I think they'd rather prefer to see what's going on with their kid in school during the day. So, but Flickr's awesome. Flickr is free to use. You get 1 terabyte of storage. I think I have like 3,500 photos on mine in full resolution, and I'm only like 3% full. So awesome stuff to use there with Flickr.
Yeah. After Megan suggested that at Whisper, then I set up a Flickr account for our district too. And it's also, I think it will be a nice way if our teachers or staff members come and they're like, oh, could I get that photo from last year's graduation banquet or whatever? You can send them to Flickr. They're organized by album. They can find it and download it on their own and save you the time and hassle. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. My predecessor had everything on a terabyte, like a 2 terabyte hard drive that only he had access to. And when I started getting archive requests, I was like, and it's because it wasn't my archive, I wouldn't even know where to begin to look for them. So I was like, oh man, this isn't going to work. So when I switched over to Flickr for our district stuff, at first I got a few questions like, where is this, where is that? It's here's the Flickr account, figure out what you need and download it. I don't know exactly what you need, so, pick out the things that work best for you as opposed to me sending you a full album back and forth. And it works pretty well. Now that our staff is aware that Flickr exists, they don't even need to come to me anymore looking for it. They just know to go there. So that's really awesome. I'll get through equipment really quickly. We found at Whisper that, for the most part, everybody we were talking to in our room had a DSLR, whether or not they knew how to use it. I think that's probably why they were there more than anything. But I usually bounce between my iPhone and my DSLR. My iPhone's great for day-to-day stuff, just for telling those little snippets of the story where you are. If you need to zoom in on stuff, your smartphone or your iPad and stuff isn't really the best option. So, this is a photo taken with an iPad. Kind of grainy, too dark, all that kind of stuff. Not exactly a great photo. And this is what I said before. Muse is a great app that allows you to control settings like white balance and your ISO and your shutter. So you have some of those DSLR controls with this app. So definitely try it out. It's free to use. It's a lot of fun. iPad tablet is great for your classroom teachers. For a PR are pros, stick with the smartphone because it's easier to carry, or carry your DSLR. But it's pretty limited because iPads don't have flash, they're lower resolution, and they're bigger, so it's easier to fumble around with them. We don't use point and shoots too often anymore, but point and shoots are really useful for your older demographic that doesn't necessarily have the tech skills, but wants to be involved or is interested in taking photos. And you can get those pretty cheap now, like under $100. So a DSLR is what I use. That's what Christina uses. I'm a Nikon user. Christina, I believe you're a Canon user, yeah?
I am, yeah.
So, and after Whisper, we had a few inquiries about equipment purchases. If you are interested in what I use for my kit on a daily basis, feel free to tweet me or email me, and I can give you the full rundown from the camera body all the way to the monopod and camera bag I use. But DSLRs are actually getting really affordable. You can get them as low as $500 generally. And if you want a Hasselblad, they're like $50,000. But I don't even know a single person that owns one of those. But DSLRs allow you to manually choose everything. It also allows you to do the automatic settings. So as you're getting used to all the buttons, you still have basically a point and shoot camera within that DSLR. Okay, so I know we ran a little bit over time, but if anybody has any questions, here's how to contact us. We're also happy to answer any questions you have now.
Awesome. Megan, can you just kick it back to me for the presentation? I'm just going to wrap up with a quick spring event. I know we're running over. I'm going to give a quick invite, and then we'll open it up to any and all questions. Alrighty, here we go. Holy cow, I wrote so many notes, you guys. That was so good, and like almost everybody stayed on, and even though we're 12 minutes past, very worthwhile. Love getting together, learning from other people. I've got a live spring event coming up, especially for those in Minnesota and Wisconsin. You know, time is one issue in regards to social media. Content, consistency, getting staff involved. You know, there's just a lot of things that go into telling your story. And so I think getting a chance to come together and have a space where you can talk and brainstorm is really powerful. And so I am setting up a spring event. It's a day dedicated for just social media. Learn from each other, get questions answered. It's not really training. I did a fun summer event last year, and it was well attended and got great reviews, but it was a lot of me explaining. I think everybody's on a little bit different page. Your school might be struggling with something specific, and how about just a chance to network with other schools? And so that's what this day is all about. It's a social media roundtable for schools. Got some of these folks on the line. I know Erin's on the line, and obviously Christina. So just a great time to be able to come together. You can actually register now at socialschoolforedu.com/spring2017. I'll send the link in the follow-up email. I'm doing 4 dates. We're going to be at Wisconsin Dells on the 24th of February. And why am I calling it a spring roundtable? Well, you know, it's wishful thinking. I'm sick of this winter. March 3rd will be in Wilmot at Wilmot High School. March 6th will be in New Auburn, Wisconsin, which is up north of Eau Claire. And then March 17th, we will be in Minneapolis at Minnehaha Academy. So lunch, beverages, snacks included. It's only $97 per person. And we will send you the invoice. You don't have to pay when you register. So just get registered. I do expect this to fill up all these locations because we can only take about 30 people. So if you are interested, have anything involved, or if you're involved at all in social media, you can register at that event. I will say if the first 5 people that actually sign up are going to get a bonus strategy call before the event with me, so we can talk specifically about, you know, maybe some of your struggles, give you some ideas and tips before we actually head to the event. So again, you can sign up at that link. I will send that out in an email, but socialschoolforedu.com/spring 2017. I will send out the emails for both Christina and Megan in the email that I send out to each of you. So you'll have access to that. I've already got somebody that said, thank you so much. This has been great. I will try to unmute everybody. So just as an advance warning, if we can't take questions that way, we'll have to type them in the chat button. But I'm going to try.
The conference is now in conversation mode.
We'll try to unmute everybody. Does anybody have a question for Christina or Megan? You can just jump in if you want. Or you can chat it in as well. Not getting anything over the top. I'm just going to mute down the lines again.
The conference is now in presentation mode.
I was trying to, so I guess one of the things that I want to ask, you talked about the decisive moment and waiting for that decisive moment. So we all, like a lot of these people on the line, and even you guys, you have a lot of responsibility besides just getting pictures. So, you know, sometimes you want to go in and spend 2 minutes and get the picture and get out. What would you say is the average time that you really have to hang out at an event or in a classroom to try to get maybe that decisive moment?
To me, I was just talking to somebody else about this, but you really need to, be aware of your use of your time too. So I think that even within 5 minutes, if you really are observant and can kind of read the room, you see like a photogenic child working on a project, sort of go and get into position, so get your perspective right, know what your composition is going to be, and then wait a minute or two for like him or her to look up or to make an expression of concentration or to have the teacher come over. So it really, I don't find that it takes that long, and I didn't mean to give the impression that you need to be, hanging out for hours to get that photo, but I think, again, just being like really observant and sort of engaged with what's happening in the room. You can walk into a classroom with 20 kids and get a good photo in a couple of minutes if you just are really looking for it and ready for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, when it comes to general classroom photos, I would agree. You can probably get what you need if you're really focused within like 5 to 10 minutes. When you're doing like event coverage, like the photo that framing photo that I took at the concert, that concert was like 2 hours long. And I certainly don't need to sit there for those full 2 hours to get the photos that I need. And when you're covering an event, generally, if you can get 5 to 10 good photos, that's more than enough to share on social media or to send out a photo gallery in your e-newsletter or whatever. But I would say, like, for, like, larger events like that, I maybe spend, like, 20 or 30 minutes tops. I'll usually spend a little bit more time when it comes to sporting events, just because those photos are tougher to take. So usually, like, if it's a basketball game or a football game, I'll usually stay for, like, the first half of the game. That's usually enough time to get my good 5 to 10 photos, and then I'm done. But you're right, it doesn't take 2 hours for you to get a good photo or for kids to be comfortable with you hanging out there. It's not as time consuming as we may have made it out to be.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. And I think like you guys described, it's like you kind of have to feel it. And so, become part of the room and become part of the classroom, and then you'll maybe be able to anticipate those things. I've got one other question, and that is, this was all on photography. Video's huge. We know that. Video, Facebook Live, and, any other short videos. Do a lot of these same things apply when you're going to take the video? And I guess the biggest one for me, the biggest takeaway is that perspective of like getting on their level. So would you say that, give that same advice for taking videos?
Yeah, I do a fair amount of video, and I just shoot it with my DSLR. So I shoot with a Canon DSLR that has video, and then I can use my same lenses to get that really high quality footage. But definitely, all of those rules of storytelling and composition um, apply to video as well. And I think even with the decisive moment idea, like you really only need each shot. Like in a 1 minute video to be a couple of seconds long. So what you want to trim down to and use would be, you know, the moment when a child's expression goes from like concentration to a big smile at having finally got it, or, you know, just sort of looking for that really, you know, concentrated moment of expression, so that you're making the most of your viewers' time, because they'll click out of a video really quickly. So I think that, you know, like I said, those fundamentals are just as key in video if you want to keep people engaged and keep people watching.
Great.
Yeah, I would agree. And if there's any one thing, perspective is important, framing is important. But if there's any one thing that I think can really ruin a video, it's bad lighting. And you don't think about it because most of the time, especially if you're using your smartphone, your video camera auto adjusts. You know, with the DSLR, maybe a little less so. But when you're in auto mode, all that stuff automatically adjusts. The problem with using the auto setting and having crappy lighting is that a lot of times you're going to get that like transitional flip where the lighting is going to go wonky, or you end up with somebody that looks really like blown out, like way too bright. So having good lighting, I think, really makes a lot of the other components so much easier to do.
Okay, great. We have some questions here now from someone. What type of lens or lenses do you use for your school photography?
I use all what we call prime lenses, so there's no zoom function. So I have 2 different lenses in my school kit, and then I have a couple that I sometimes bring from home too. But mostly I use a 35 millimeter lens, which is a wide angle lens. I find that's really great to sort of get close to the subject, but still get a good sense of context and of the room. And then I also have a 130 millimeter lens, which is good for like concerts and sporting events. But with a prime lens where there's no zoom, it really does force you to, I call it zoom with your feet. So to really move your body and get to be part of the event or the moment. So I think that helps me in just being observant and sort of getting that feel for when something exciting is about to happen, that I'm forced to be right in the midst of it because of the equipment that I choose. But like Megan said, I would be happy to, you know, email my list of everything that's in my bag to anyone who has their questions about specifics or wants advice.
And I would say for me, on the opposite end, and I don't know how Christina does it with fixed lenses. I think maybe the journalism industry spoiled me because everything I had back then was a zoom lens. So everything in my kit is a zoom lens, and I have 3 different lenses that I work with. A 14 to 24, a 24 to 55, and a 55 to 200. So that kind of covers the range from really wide angle, almost a fisheye lens, all the way up to a good zoom lens. And for me, that's all I need. All of those photos are 2.8 aperture. You can get aperture that's lower than that, but usually those are fixed prime lenses. I would say if you're looking to invest in a good DSLR, good lenses, invest your money in your lenses, because those are going to last longer and they're not going to be outpaced by technology as opposed to your camera body. Your camera body is probably going to break first, just to be honest. And like the lenses that I have in my bag now will honestly, and they belong to the district, they're not my lenses, will last the district 20 years. They're metal bodies, they're very sturdy. As long as they don't get dropped and they're treated well, they'll last 2 decades easily.
Okay, that's good. That's a lot of terms I don't understand, and that's why I need to learn more about that. But they also ask, how do you prioritize your time when it comes to photography, especially since you guys are both one-person teams? Do you choose events ahead of time, or do you dedicate a certain time every month to visit classrooms, etc.?
For me, it's a little bit of both. Like, first year out, prioritizing my time was a little tough. This being my second year in the district, I kind of know what's coming up. So those big events that are big community draws, like you always know those are things that you personally are going to cover. Smaller things that reoccur yearly, you don't necessarily have to be at. That's where I tap into my Falls Creative kids. Like Friday night we had empty bowls where all of our art students made ceramic bowls and they served soup in them, and it was a fundraiser for the food pantry. I sent one of our Falls Creative kids. She took amazing photos, but that happens every year. So I can choose to either bring in a student contractor or I can go myself. When it comes to being in the classroom, for me, generally for our district, our teachers are pretty social media savvy, as are our building principals. So the day-to-day photos in the classroom aren't necessarily me. They're usually our teachers. But when I have a project that I'm working on, so like I know I'm going to need some good classroom photos for our realtor's guide, or I know I'm going to need some good classroom photos for our annual report, that I'll plan into. So, and that usually takes a little bit more planning. It's, finding out which teachers are doing something interesting in their school. And so for me, I will definitely get into a classroom and get the classroom photos, the activity photos, probably once or twice a month. But it's certainly not a daily or weekly thing. That's way more of the schools and the teachers handling that, because it's also their responsibility to keep parents updated as to what's going on in their schools.
Yeah, and I guess my frustration has been that I'll often get like a really crappy cell phone photo of a really great event after the fact, and I'll be like, well, I would have been there. So my focus has been on really educating our teachers about, what I'm interested in, and, asking them to ask me first. So I won't be able to cover everything, but please at least let me know in advance so that I have it on my radar. And I have a social media presentation that I give at the beginning of the school year, and so that covers how they should sort of behave on social media personally, and guidelines for posting things from their classroom on social media. And then at that time, I also talk about what my interest is in storytelling on social media and how they can help me and support me in that.
That's awesome. And it really comes full circle to where you started from, where you say, what's our strategic plan for our district? And I'm sure those 4 bullets are things that you talk to your staff that you're interested in getting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much, Christina, Megan. That was so wonderful. A lot of Power Pack stuff. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Again, if you're interested in getting together for a full day, check out that link for the spring event. I will let you know I'll be at a convention in Milwaukee next week for Wisconsin. There's over 2,000 attendees, and I plan on promoting this event. So I do expect to get filled up very soon, and so the sooner you can get signed up and pick a date, the better. And certainly if you have any questions at all, let me know. But a lot of information from here. Linda asked, would you be willing to share some of or all of that presentation? Yes, you will get Linda's probably asking Christina for your presentation that you do with your staff members maybe at the beginning of the year. Yeah. Any chance that you...
Yeah, sure.
So I don't have to send it out to everybody necessarily if you don't want to, Christina, but I could, Linda, watch for her email, and then you can email Christina and she'll be able to get that out for you. That'd be a great blog topic too, as we head into the beginning of the year, June, for you guys to start thinking about sharing with staff in August when they come back. is how to not only give you great stuff, but how to act on social media and, when they're on their own, because we all need reminders of that. So thanks again so much, everybody, for tuning in. You'll be getting an email later this afternoon with all of the information. Keep telling your story. And next month, we're talking about Instagram, so watch for that webinar invite. And the following month, we're going to be talking about creating an army of tweeters, which are teachers that tweet. Both great guest presenters like we had today for both February and March. So stay tuned and have a great day, you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.